Hi, and welcome to Teacher Use Microsoft Excel tutorial for PCs, Part 2. In our first tutorial, we took a look at our initial sample sets of data, data A, B, and C. We ensured that all of our data was arranged correctly with student names along the left side of the spreadsheet as well as objectives along the top. We then added in any additional columns containing information that we are going to use to later break down and cut our student achievement data. Now that we've learned how to do those, we're going to use the same data sets to now take a look at two really important tools in Excel, filters and formulas that are going to allow you to break down and begin summarizing your student achievement data. So the objectives for this session are, number one, teachers will be able to use the average formula to calculate data. And number two, teachers will be able to create filters and use them to view initial summaries of data. So we're going to take a look again at each of our data samples, data A, B, and C. I'm then going to show you how to apply filters to your data, specifically those two columns that we added at the end, and how that's going to help you begin to look at specific sets of student data. For each spreadsheet, I'm then going to move on and show you how to use the average formula. Now that you've narrowed down the data, how do we use this formula to help you summarize the information that you see there? So we're going to begin with filters. And filters are a tool on Excel that allow you to take large amounts of data and filter out only the specific information that you want to look at, hiding the rest of the information so you can really focus in on specific smaller amounts of data. So let's start by taking a look at data A. And this is going to be the saved version from part 1 of this video series. So you can see that we have student names on the left, we have objective on the top. We also have our two columns here at the end that we've added, sex and race. So these are the two categories that we're going to begin to break down this student achievement data by. And so I'm going to show you how to apply filters. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to pay attention to which columns we're going to be applying filters to, which is A, N, and AO. One thing to take note of in the newest version of Excel is that it's really important that these labels that we're going to apply filters to are directly on top of the actual data. These blank cells that you see here in rows 2 and 3 are actually going to provide a pretty large problem for the newest version of Excel. So I'm going to highlight these 3 boxes and I'm going to go ahead and cut them. And I'm going to paste them right on top of this data. We now see that there are no blank cells in between the data we're looking at and the actual header on those columns. Now we're ready to go ahead and add the filters. I'm going to leave these 3 column headers highlighted. I'm then going to head up to my menu bar and I want to select Data. Underneath that we see a filter option right here. When I click on that, you're going to see that it's added drop-down menus to each of these column headers. And this is what's going to allow us to begin filtering out specific information. So let's begin with sex. This one's a little bit easier. We only have 2 choices. Students are either male or female. When I click on the drop-down, we can see at the top I have the option to sort in either ascending order, which would be alphabetically in this case, or in descending order, which would be reverse alphabetically. And then down here we see the text filters, and this is going to give us the specific contents of that column. So we see we have an option of select all, which is selected right now, and that means we're seeing all female students as well as all male students. However, here's where I can choose to filter out specific information. If I want to begin to look at just my female students, then I'm going to uncheck the male box. So now the only option selected is female, and when I click OK, this entire spreadsheet is going to filter out only the student information for my female students. When I click OK, we see that it's done exactly that. As you look down, we see we have a lot less students, and we only have our female students represented. So this is an initial look at what our student achievement data looks like for our female students versus our male. In order to filter out by male, I'm going to re-click on the filter. I'm going to select male, and I'm going to unselect female. I'm going to click OK, and now it's done the exact same thing except we're looking at only the male students. So this gives you a good opportunity to begin looking at the overall student mastery for males versus females. However, when we want to get more specific and look at the actual averages of student mastery for males and females, now's where we're going to begin to use a formula. There are a lot of formulas that Excel uses to calculate data, However, the one we're going to use for this example is average. Almost every time we're looking at student achievement data, we don't want to add it all up because that gives us a really large number with very little meaning for us. Instead, we want to average it and get an idea as to how a group of students are performing on average. So this is what the formula looks like in Excel. Average, AVG, is the abbreviation for average in formulas. Now this was acceptable in older versions of Excel. In this version of Excel, you're going to have to type that out as AVERAGE, so the whole word. Okay. Every formula begins with an equal sign, so we see that the average formula starts with an equal sign. We then type average to tell Excel that we want to average these specific cells. And then in parentheses, you're going to tell Excel which specific cells you want it to average. And there are two ways to do this. First of all, you can type in each individual cell using its cell address. So we see here we have cells A1, and we're going to separate them all by commas, comma A2, comma A3, comma A4, and then we need to close the parentheses. When you press enter in that cell, rather than seeing the formula, you're going to see the average of those cells that you've told it to calculate. Another way to do this, and this works better when you're working with large numbers of data, you're going to indicate that you want a range of cells to be calculated. So if you look at the second example here, we see equal, average, and in parentheses, rather than type out each individual cell, I've indicated that I want Excel to calculate the range of cells from A1 colon, which indicates through cell A4. This is going to calculate the exact same thing as the first example, but if you're looking at 10 or 20 or more cells, then this is going to save you a lot of time at calculating. And I'm going to show you how to do this both ways. So let's go back to sample set A. And right now we're looking at the male students. So we're going to start by calculating the average student achievement score for male students. So I'm going to enter this right down here. I'm going to click on that cell. I'm going to begin to type in the formula. I'm going to start with an equal sign. I'm going to type average, and we see over here on the right that the newest version of Excel is prompting us. It thinks it knows exactly what we want to use. So I'm going to put in parentheses. Now the cells that I'm looking at here are AM5, which is this one, comma, and you can click on it or you can type it in. I'm going to separate with a comma. Then I'm looking at AM7. So we see here that these don't fall in exact order. It does not go from AM5 to AM6. And this is because we have a female student hiding in between these two. If we enter a range of cells for this particular example, then it's going to include all the female student achievement data as well. So when you're using the filters, you often want to make sure that you're carefully entering each cell address. So now I'm going to enter in AM7, AM9, AM11, AM13, and so on. I'm going to show you for this example what it looks like once I enter all of them. Once I've entered the last student, we see that each box is highlighted. I'm going to close the parentheses and press enter. Our student achievement average for male students is 78%. I'm going to move over here to the left and I'm going to enter this information, 78%, so I have it for later purposes. And we see the formatting of this is a little weird. It's arranged vertically. So I'm just going to go here to Format Cells, go to Alignment, and I want this to be at 0 degrees, and that's going to make it horizontal. Okay? Now I'm looking at normal numbers. I'm now going to delete where this number was. I've written it down below so that we can go through and we can do the same thing for our female students. I'm going to re-click on our filter, uncheck male, check female, okay, and now I'm going to do the same thing. Equals average, in parentheses, cell AM4, AM6, I'm going to show you a trick in the next example for how we can set up our data at the beginning so that it will be in order and there will be no students hiding in between, and that's going to make it a lot easier to go ahead and enter ranges. But I do think it's important to know how to enter it in manually in case you need to do that. And it's always important to check that your cells are next to each other before you enter a range. AM26 is my last one. I'm going to close the parentheses and I'm going to click enter. And we see our student achievement average for female students is 71%.